On today's show, the Bucks roster rankings continues. We had a little bit of debate from 1 to 5, but 6 to 15 could get interesting. Some difficult decisions to be made and different ways that you can look at how we fill out these roster rankings from 6 to 15. Let's continue the conversation.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work over at ESPN alongside me, the founder of BrewHoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden, for today's episode that is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter the promo code LockedOnNBA for a free white tech hat with any purchase. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We can promise you that. We also thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every day. And look, during the off-season, we have fun topics to get through, including very debatable, potentially controversial roster rankings for the Bucks. So make sure you get involved in the show, whether it's YouTube or the audio platform. Like, subscribe, drop a comment. Get involved. It helps the show, and it's free to do. So we appreciate all the support. Frank, let's get this thing rolling. 6 through 15. First, go back and listen to yesterday's podcast if you've missed it, 1 through 5. But just as a recap, a refresher to start, my top 5, Giannis, Middleton, Lopez, Holiday, Bobby Portis. Frank went with Giannis, Middleton, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, Pat Connaughton. So that's where we're at so far. Now, for those that listened yesterday, I think we know where you're going with number 6, but get us started, Frank, because this is where I think things do get a little bit interesting. And if we are going through the expansion draft model that they certainly did on the Bill Simmons podcast, that was a top 7 players were protected. So if you do want to look at it through that lens, the next couple of picks are very, very important, Frank.
Yeah, and they did a little differently because they did top 8, and then rookies were not eligible to be drafted, so you didn't have to protect them at all. Yep. So Andre Jackson, Chris Livingston, you're not in a risk of losing them in the sort of hypothetical expansion draft concept that they were talking about. But we're just going to go through the full roster. And again, applying the sort of, again, it's a little bit, there's a trade value component to this, but at the end of the day, we just sort of are using the kind of shorthand of, who would you least want to lose to another team? Who would you least want to just get pulled off your roster and they're no longer part of your team moving forward? So, I mean, I finished yesterday's podcast sort of debating Pat Connaughton versus Marjon Beauchamp, sort of the classic proven guy who helped you win a championship, but is 30 years old, is paid a bit more. Honestly, we'll talk about this with a few of these guys now in the next few slots. Is it bad that Pat Connaughton and Bobby Portis and Grayson Allen make between, $9 and $12 million versus Malik Beasley makes, $2 million from a cap perspective? I mean, you can make the argument that it's actually like more valuable to have these guys in some of these mid-tier salary slots because of what that allows you to do potentially moving forward from a trade flexibility standpoint. We've obviously talked about the need to aggregate salaries to make a play for, if you want to go and trade for a guy who's making $20 million, it's like, well, Malik Beasley doesn't really help you do that, right? Robin Lopez doesn't help you do that. But Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton, Bobby Portis, those contracts, the fact that they're, solid NBA contributors, on top of making, sort of the numbers that are sort of in the ballpark of a non-tax mid-level, is actually useful from a roster flexibility standpoint. It costs more from a luxury tax perspective, but that's, kind of just one of those kind of part of the deal. So again, I was trading off between Pat and Marjon Beauchamp, proven player versus, younger, cheaper, upsideier guy. I ultimately defaulted to being a washed up dad who, basically says, give me the guy that's done it. Marjon Beauchamp, God bless his soul, he's only been with the Bucks for 12 months. He has not done it so far. But I will put him at number 6 based on, again, a few things. One, he was a first round pick. So clearly you thought he could be a good player. And as we've pointed out, I mean, he doesn't have to be a 20-point scorer or even a 15-point scorer. He doesn't have to do a ton of offensive creation. If he can just be a very good and ideally versatile defender, make enough open threes, and maybe be a guy that can help you doing kind of dirty work stuff, crashing the offensive boards, getting out in transition, score 10 points a game and play really good defense. With his body type, that becomes a super valuable asset, super valuable player, especially as this team is inevitably going to have to try to transition into sort of the next version of the Milwaukee Bucks beyond, kind of the current core four iteration. So I put Marjon at 6, but as we said last time, a year from now, we may look at that and be like, well, that was really stupid. He didn't do anything this year. Or we may say like, well, he should have been 5 because
he should have been number 2. What were we thinking? Get ahead of the curve.
Yeah, because he plays really well and establishes himself as a rotation guy, right? Could kind of swing either way. So I'll kind of hedge my bets, put him at number 6. And again, like we saw some things in summer league. I don't know that we saw any sort of resounding things in Vegas that would give us reason for tons of optimism. But we've seen him actually at times play really well in actual NBA game action last year. And so now it's a question of, can he do that consistently? I think I saw the stat that he was one of the worst wide open 3-point shooters in the league. Like he shot like 30% or something like that, which was like, I think, bottom 10 or something like that in the league for guys who shot a minimum number. So he actually shot better, I think, on like contested threes than wide open threes, since he was at 33%, I think, for the season. So yeah, he's got room to, obviously he has to get better. But I think the Bucks, and certainly all indications are, great kid, super hard worker, isn't going to take this for granted. But again, just being a good dude doesn't mean a whole lot if you can't play and you can't improve at a really high level. And so that's obviously the next question for Marjon. So I don't know if you want to go with your number 6 here, or if you want to tell us where you put Marjon, if it's close. But I don't know, Kane, what were you thinking at number 6?
No, I had him there as well. And which, by the way, means that we both have a veteran championship player that's sliding down the list. Now, different names, Pat Connaughton and Bobby Portis, those guys. So they're eventually going to come up here. But for the reasons that you mentioned, and again, depending on how you're looking at it, you want to look at the upside, you want to look at the potential. I maybe would have had Beauchamp at 7 or 8, but when you drop 83 in a Pro-Am, I'm a simple guy. And I was like, we're going to get this guy up the list. So, no, I do like the idea of positionally where he fits with the Bucks. I spoke with Stan Vizzini last week about his developmental curve. This is his first full off season coming off a rookie season in the NBA. So maybe there is some room there to step up. I think he's the type of guy that's going to be better playing with better players. So Summer League might not be the most indicative example of what we can expect from him. And ultimately, I think he's going to get opportunities. So I had Beauchamp there as well. And I just think it's an important year for him. So I think there is some level of pressure, but hopefully we look back at the end of the year and say, yep, 6 was about right. That was where he should be. I think that would be a pretty damn good result for Bucks fans. I'm going to get to my number 7 after I talk about our friends at Bird Dogs. And look, you guys know that I love my Bird Dogs shorts. Bird Dogs make you look good. They have the stretch khaki that is designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look so you can get those quads out there for the people to see. And Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They fit way better than your regular shorts that can be made of stiff, restricting cotton. There's nothing of that with Bird Dogs, and they're good for any occasion, whether you're exercising, out with the family, doing some stuff, getting around the house, maybe some housework, also good. But you can also wear them out for dinner. Maybe you're going on a date. And if you really want to impress your partner when you're going out for a date, then Bird Dog shorts will get it done, even if the conversation is terrible. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter the promo code LockedOnNBA for a free white tech hat. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the promo code LockedOnNBA for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you that. All right, Frank, let's continue down the rankings. I'll go with 7. So we both had Marjon Beauchamp at 6. I feel like people are going to be divided. They're either going to go, yep, you fellas are on the ball with Beauchamp at 6, or they're going to go, you're absolutely ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense. That's the fun of this topic. I mentioned that 2 veterans were sliding. One championship veteran was sliding. I'm bringing him in, Pat Connaughton. I feel a little bit, bad about it because, again, we've spoken. This is a guy that can play in any playoff series. Last year was a tough year. He just didn't feel like, to me, physically, he ever quite got right. He had those soft tissue injuries right from November, and it just didn't feel like he had the continuity. But I would expect a bounce back season. He's been so reliable. I have no reason not to expect that was coming. So I went with Pat at number 7.
Yeah, and fittingly, I had Pat at 5. You had Bobby at 5.
You got Bobby.
I have Bobby at 7. You had Pat at 7. So we just sort of flip-flopped. The 2 guys who, for me, will be forever linked after the championship, of course. I'm sure many of you can guess what I'm about to reference, but the 2 of them sitting together courtside, being interviewed on, I think it was ESPN.
That's right.
Do you remember the question they were asked? But they both have, like champagne
bottles. It was like,
bottles.
how much champagne have you drunk? Or something
like that.
How drunk
are you? And they just looked at each other for a second, then just start cackling, laughing. One of my all-time favorite Bucks gifs / video moments between those 2 dudes. So yeah, fitting. I don't think I probably need to add a whole lot more on Bobby. I mean, I think I mentioned kind of the playoff consistency, playability questions, were my main reason for dropping him lower. But I think we saw a couple of years ago, right? I referenced in the prior pod, as essential as Brook Lopez has been to this team, especially the defense the last couple of years, and last year offensively as well, they won 52 games without him.
Mm-hmm.
I think they had a better point differential that year than they did last year, if I recall correctly. I don't know, somebody double check on that, but so how do they do that? And I think it underscores, like kind of what you were alluding to, just the fact that Bobby is a guy that is, for what he may lack in the playoffs, I mean, he's such a useful regular season piece because, again, he's always going to have some of those defensive questions. I'm actually really, really curious to see how Adrian Griffin and the new coaching staff deploys him defensively. Do they have him switch a lot more? Hopefully they will, not really have him dropping very much, because I think that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Hopefully they'll have him play higher up, closer to the level of screen, or maybe even switch. Which, again, not that he's like some lockdown switch defender, but I think I think he's actually like pretty competent at that. I don't know. Maybe
we don't need the old Marvin Williams in the drop coverage,
Yeah, that was the worst. Marvin Williams in the drop coverage in the bubble was just so bad. But yeah, I mean, just a guy that, like, night in and night out, I mean, just piles up doubles, and when you need a boost, like the emotional boost, right, of Bobby Portis. I mean, I think that's a real thing. I think the locker room piece of this is, you can't quantify it, but I do think it's a real thing. And we've talked about, right, to make a meaningful upgrade, acquire a bigger contract, very good chance that Bobby would have to be traded away, which is another reason why I think he has value, that you don't want to just like lose him in an expansion draft type scenario, which, again, we know isn't happening. There's no 31st team showing up this season, but in sort of in theory, that would be another reason. He's a guy that's productive, and he has a decent sized contract that could be useful in terms of potential trades. Which, again, not that we want to. I feel so dirty even suggesting that we're keeping Bobby around for trade purposes, but this is the reality of the league. This is the business.
It's part of the conversation.
And, I mean, this team has championship ambitions. As great as it is that Bobby's a really good regular season player, the postseason stuff, I think, obviously factors in, and was a reason. Maybe Kane Pittman didn't ding him too much for it, but I'll give him a little bit of a demerit for that as well. But yeah, Bobby Portis. I'm excited. I mean, in my heart of hearts, I have a heart, Kane. I have a heart. I am, in my heart of hearts, still happy that Bobby Portis is a Milwaukee Buck. It brings me joy.
And I think it's good for the podcast. It's good for the rankings that we've actually had relatively different lists. Like, I'm only just shuffling here or there, but I think it's going to get interesting now as well, because you can look at it again through the idea of which players do you think out of this list are the safer bets to help you contribute to winning a title or having a deep playoff run this year? Or you can buy into the upside a little bit. Now, I'm not ashamed to sit here and say that when I podcasted with Sam Vecini last week and he was talking about Andre Jackson and he was nearly brought to tears, he was so excited about talking about the promise of Andre Jackson Jr., that I got sucked in a little bit. And in the last 7 days, my internal expectations have risen. I've got Andre Jackson Jr. at number 8. And we will see how he fits along these guys. I think there's question marks, obviously, with the outside shooting. This is not the typical skill set that we've seen for Bud's Bucks. I think his playmaking is intriguing. The athleticism is a beautiful thing to see on this team. And again, as I typically do, I'm probably going glass half full, thinking that if he does become a guy that you can play on this roster this year and you think his value grows from where it was as a second-round draft pick, the franchise is going to be in a better spot. Now, as you said, with the expansion draft that those guys did, rookies weren't eligible, so he was going to stay on the roster either way. But I'm intrigued by a rookie, Frank, and there are certainly safer picks and probably more certain picks that you can go with. But that's the path I went down. What angle did you take?
So I listened to all the pods with Sam, who's awesome, and we leaned heavily on Sam's scouting reports on the night of the draft for people that listened, because he does. I mean, nobody does as good a job, as comprehensive a job as Sam, kind of scouting these guys, and so I'm very excited that Sam is excited about Andre Jackson, and that he believes in him. I definitely would fall more into the on the relative spectrum of skeptics. Especially with his offense. So I'll give you my kind of Andre Jackson take, because I do not have him at 8. Whenever I hear people talk about and this came up too, is like, well, his missed knock is that he's not an outside shooter. He doesn't score at all anyway. It's not just a shooting problem with him. I think and again, I have not watched a ton of him, so I hope that I see something different, but he just does not strike me that, even though he can dribble the ball, right? He can dribble a ball. He has good passing instincts. He's really athletic. He has like that weird floater that he shoots from surprisingly far out, and he actually made some of those in Vegas. But you just look at like his efficiency inside the arc, like just take away the threes. He just doesn't know how to score like from anywhere, it seems. And again, I know he's like has some cutting instincts, whatever, but I just don't think you can put the ball in his hands and expect him to have any idea to turn the athleticism and the ball hand. It just doesn't seem very functional. Like, and again, the fact that obviously teams are going to play him, give him 3-point shots. He also doesn't strike me as a guy who's like going to be able to use a cushion like Giannis does, right? Again, like we're not really comparing him to Giannis, but it's sort of one of those things, right? Like I think his role has to be that like stereotypical like Draymond Green set screens. I don't think you can put the ball in his hands and expect him to break down a defense, or at least I haven't seen any evidence that he can do that. I mean, he had, I think, more turnovers than assists in Vegas, I think, and more turnovers than field goals. So I think the offense is just really limited. And as you said, I think he has to be on the floor with more talent. I mean, clearly Vegas was not a good proxy for kind of like the best way to use his skill set in the NBA. But I think he's just a weirdo, and I don't know. I mean, like, nothing would really surprise me. But even like saying like, oh, well, he's got to be kind of in a Draymond role. I mean, Draymond scored a lot in college. Like, Andre Jackson didn't average 7 points a game, right? He doesn't get to the free throw line, can't shoot free throws well, can't score using his athleticism very well. So I just have a lot of questions that offensively he can never get to the kind of base competency. And I hope that the basketball IQ and the passing, kind of overwhelm some of those other limitations. But that's basically kind of where my skepticism comes from. So get off my lawn, Kane. I'm being the cranky old man. I have Andre Jackson a little further down. The person that I do have at number 8 is the man that nobody likes, Kane. Mm-hmm. It's the man that, very few people probably had even as high as number 8. It is Grayson Allen, who, for all the hemming and hawing about what he doesn't do, is actually a good NBA. He's a
Yeah, he
good
is.
NBA basketball player.
Certainly
I
is.
think he has a 61% true shooting in the playoffs for the Milwaukee Bucks in 3 series. But again, kind of all we remember obviously is the struggles he had against the Boston Celtics. But and him not getting a shot off against the Heat at the end of overtime in Game 5. So again, bad luck. Grayson Allen shows up after they win a championship and just kind of hasn't been able to kind of be part of the level of winning that we were hoping he would be as a member of the Milwaukee Bucks. But again, a really efficient offensive player in terms of scoring, shooting, can put on the deck a little bit, has some offensive versatility. Not a great passer, but a competent passer. Can sometimes take the dribble handoff and drive and get the kind of wraparound pass to the roller. And again, do I wish he was a higher volume 3-point shooter? Yes. We talked about that in kind of the comparison with Pat Connaughton, and we'll talk about that with Malik Beasley as well. But I just don't think you can look at kind of the last couple years and say that. Certainly, I think Beasley is the most interesting guy to compare him to. And I mean, I want Malik Beasley to be good. I love the signing at the minimum for Malik Beasley, but there's a reason why he was available at the minimum. It's because he does have real limitations defensively and offensively. And so I think just, aside from Beasley being just a much more prolific shooter of the ball, not necessarily maker of shots, but certainly he's much better at getting up 3-point shots at volume. I think other than that, Grayson Allen has been a better basketball player than him. And the other thing too about Beasley, the downside of that contract being so cheap is you're not going to be able. I mean, if he's good, you're probably not going to be able to keep him because you'd need to use basically a mid-level to sign him. You're not going to have bird rights on him, so you'd only be able to offer him 120% of his minimum salary next year if he's really good, or if you somehow have the mid-level exception, the tax-free mid-level exception, which again, if he is really good, then ideally he would play himself into a much bigger contract. So even though Grayson's also an expiring contract, and we've talked about how it's kind of like, well, if you don't want to keep him, you got to trade him. I think Grayson, the higher contract number is actually useful from a trading perspective. And I think the irony with Beasley is that it's going to be really hard to keep him if he ends up actually kind of playing as well as we hope he will be. So again, I like the Beasley signing. I'm optimistic. I would happily kind of find trades involving Grayson Allen, in part because I want to see what Beasley can do, and I think he can take up a lot of that role. But I think Grayson Allen's still a better basketball player, and that's why I have him at number 8.
So unsurprisingly, you've just got very distracted, and you've given us your full thoughts on Andre Jackson Jr., Beasley as well. So just to recap, so
Can you figure out my 8, 9, 10?
I don't even know what number we're up to anymore. But so 8,
Grayson Allen.
8 is Grayson Allen for you. For me, I went Jackson Jr., and that might be a little bit of a reach, and we'll see how this all looks at the end of the year. And again, I said that I was going to...
People will like you more. Kane, you will do better in the YouTube comments. I will be the pinata.
I don't know.
Everybody likes the young guys, so just, I get it. I'm the hater. It's only he's only played 4 preseason or 4 Vegas games, but whatever.
But it also doesn't, and this is why I said at the very start of the first 1 to 5 that I'm going to contradict myself, because again, if you're talking about right now on opening night, the importance to what's going to help you be a consistent regular season team, and then one of the players we haven't even mentioned yet, one guy that actually has some real relevance when it comes to playoff flexibility, a veteran player that we haven't mentioned yet. So it's I'm all over the shop. But number 9, I went with Grayson Allen because I've discussed on the podcast this week, as you pointed to, this guy started every game last year virtually that he played. He shot the ball well. He was 48% from 3 in the postseason, and he's just a good NBA player. And I understand why people don't necessarily love him. I do think that maybe across the league, the trade value is a little bit lower than, as we already mentioned, guys that are in a similar vein, Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton, maybe. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But I had Grayson Allen at number 9, so I'm assuming you had Beasley at 9?
Yeah, I had Beasley at 9 over Andre Jackson Jr. And so I think we had the same 3, just in different order.
Yeah, so we did. So I ended up having Beasley at 10, and then Jackson Jr. Obviously, you had at 10 there. So is Jae Crowder 11 for both of us? And this is interesting. Why is Jae Crowder number 11? I think the contract plays into it. He's on a minimum contract. We discussed the idea last year of what his value was going to be. And I think if you had told us that you're going to get Jae Crowder, you're going to keep him for a minimum, you'd say, all right, we'll take that. Because you just traded for him. He was on that $10 million deal. When you traded for him, you had hopes that he was going to be a critical playoff player. He basically wasn't in the rotation by the end of the 5-game loss in the first round. But he had a weird season. I don't know what a full off season does for him, but the reality is we don't really know what Jae Crowder is at this point in time. But I think I've gone for upside. We both went Beauchamp pretty high. But just based on right now what we have seen in the past, Crowder is probably expected to play a bigger role than number 11 in the rotation. So why is he 11 for you?
I think it's just the role question, and I think we've talked about it a fair bit. He's mainly been a small ball 4, right? And his value has been that he can be a starting small ball 4 with the traditional center and DeAndre Ayton and good wings around him. And that's not a role that is available in Milwaukee because you have Giannis, right? So then the question becomes, okay, so is he Giannis's backup? Well, you have Bobby Portis, and Bobby Portis plays 4 and 5, right? Even if you say he's mainly a 5. So then we get to this, again, this question of like, can Jae Crowder give you minutes at the wing? And John Horst, I think, is referred to him. I think in Vegas, I think you referred to him as kind of like a big wing defender for them. I don't think they would have given up 5 second-round picks if they didn't think that he had a chance to be a guy that defends, small forwards, or at least not like, big 4s. So I think probably the organization believes that he can do those things. But let's also remember, the organization, they had bird rights. They could have offered him more than what he got. I'm guessing he didn't have a big market, which surprises me a little bit. I'm surprised he didn't have more than like I would have thought like someone would have offered him more than a minimum. Maybe they did. I don't know. And so I think the question for him is like, can he? Sounds like, I think what I've heard is that he wanted to lose some weight, get a little bit lighter, get into, have a proper summer training camp, get into proper basketball shape. But, I think we also need to be clear. His regular season numbers were actually pretty good last year, but it was just a, small sample. And then the playoffs obviously were just like, kind of a no-show, and didn't get tons of opportunities, but obviously just fell flat on his face in the small number of opportunities he got. And when you don't advance and you don't contribute, then, what can you say, right? That unfortunately he didn't have a chance to make up for it the next round. He's been a famously streaky playoff performer, even when kind of he had a much higher, kind of reputation. So yeah, I think there's a version where we look back and say, wow, Jae Crowder was way more important than, the way that we talked about him over the summer and in this exercise. But I don't, I still don't know, like, does he play every night? Like, I think the way the roster is currently constructed is just a bit weird, because I think you've got enough wings probably to cover the 2-3 spots. And, do you need to play more than Giannis, Bobby, Brooke at the 4 or 5 spots? Like, historically, you would say, no, you don't need to play anybody else. So yeah, I'm just really curious to see sort of like where they kind of give him minutes. I think the answer is maybe they're going to give him wing minutes. But again, maybe he doesn't play every night. But I'm just really curious to see kind of, again, what kind of shape he's in, and hopefully he's looking svelte and fit, and maybe he's able to kind of play down a bit more than he has in the past. Again, not that he's like some enormous dude. He's 6'6", 230. So he's strong, but he's not like a particularly tall guy. So, so we'll see. But yeah, I think he was the obvious pick at 11 for me, because I think once we go past that, we're looking at guys that probably are, not really going to play a whole lot. But yeah, he's kind of a wild card for this season.
I'm going 12 through 15 all at once. I think we can push through these guys. So I had AJ Green 12, Thanasis 13, Robin Lopez 14, and I think that's I chuckle because Lopez Thanasis, two guys that have Lopez coming back, the two guys that have been around the Bucks a lot. So I don't know, you pick and choose however you want to rank those guys. I put Thanasis first because I think he has got some value that we don't all see to the franchise. So AJ Green, Thanasis, Lopez, then Chris Livingston at number 15. Where are you at?
I had Robin. I'm sorry. No, I said, I had AJ Green at 12 as well. Basically the young guy who may actually be something.
Might be the best shooter on the team.
Yeah. I mean, you could make a case that AJ Green should be higher than this,
Yeah.
but I had him at 12. I had Rolo at 13. And then I had Chris Livingston 14 and Thanasis 15, in part because it's just like, well, if we're thinking of this as an expansion draft, it's like, why would an expansion team take Thanasis?
But the argument was
in the Simmons thing, like Simmons took Thanasis because kind of as a joke, right? To be like, oh, I want to be in the, are they making a move for Giannis discussions, right? Because that's basically the way Thanasis is.
I mean, he asked why a team didn't give Thanasis like $5 million a year, that idea, and we've seen it in the past.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Shams, reported it and was asking around like the Knicks are like, what are the Knicks doing, right? What are the Knicks up to? And I don't know. It sounds like the Knicks actually were serious enough about the Giannis pandering that they would have potentially offered Thanasis a roster spot. So, but I don't think. I mean, if you're Thanasis, like, why would you want to? Okay, I'm sure he would like to, have a basketball career outside of Giannis's shadow, but I mean, you're not going to play in New York. Like Thanasis, you're. I mean, I think he's probably also hopefully self-aware enough to know what that would be about. So it's like, what, they're going to roster him for a couple years, like hoping that Giannis gets pissed off and gets traded. I mean, it'd be a pretty weird scenario. So anyway, yeah, no disrespect to any of the guys in the bottom here of our rankings, but
got to do it. Yeah,
somebody's gotta fall on the sword, and I don't know. Chris Livingston. I mean, I feel like I'm higher on Chris. I'm lower on Andre Jackson than Sam, but I feel like I'm maybe slightly higher than Sam is on Livingston. Because Sam is not high on Livingston at all. But honestly, that's for all these guys, you should by default be very low, because we know typically how these guys do and, well, usually don't pan out. But hope springs eternal. But it's August, so I'm becoming more skeptical, Kane. July is when there's hope springs eternal. In August, we start to get cynical and hardened and, crotchety. So I'm kind of getting up to speed in terms of old man crotchetiness here, putting Andre Jackson 10th and Chris Livingston 14th.
Well, we got through it 1 through 15 across 2 podcasts. I'll put the full rankings at the end of this podcast, and I'll put the 1 through 5 on the first one. So if you've got to this point, I guess you know what our rankings are. But still, if you didn't listen to the first one, go back and listen to it, 1 through 15. I'm looking forward to getting into the debate on YouTube. I'm sure people have their thoughts and feelings, and I'm sure that some of the guys we had 12 through 15, some people may have in their top 10. I'm curious. I'm curious to know how people look at it and their reasoning for why they have players in certain positions. But let us know what you thought. That is the ultimate off-season exercise, and always a little bit of fun as well. So we appreciate you all supporting the show. Like I always say, drop a like, a comment, subscribe, rate, review, and do all those types of things. It really helps us. That'll do it for this week. We'll see what we got coming up. FIBA World Cup not too far away. So we'll be back next week. We'll see you all you guys then.